On September 23rd, Ben Brode, the lead designer for Hearthstone, gave an interview to Yahoo Esports in which he spoke about the role of randomness in the game. I disagreed with some of what he had to say. Here is my response. But first, I should say that I'm a long-time player of Hearthstone myself. I first started playing during the closed beta. Even today, I consider myself a regular player and a fan. And also, it may be worth noting that I'm a game developer. I've been professionally making video games for over 20 years. Most recently, I worked on Disney Infinity before it was shut down. If you're curious to know more, I'm sure you can search up videos of me squinting into the camera and giving a few press interviews elsewhere on YouTube. I include this note to illustrate that I've been thinking about game design issues for decades. Of course, who I am doesn't really matter. Only the design analysis and what it means for the game does. Anyway, Ben made two key points. I want to respond to them in order of importance. So, first, there's this.
A lot of people kind of, I think, misunderstand about randomness is that it isn't on a scale with skill. There's not like skill and randomness and you have to tune it somewhere between the two. You can actually have more randomness and more skill. There's games like tic-tac-toe that have no randomness and really, honestly, no skill. But there's games like poker that have both heavy amounts of skill and randomness, and they can coexist.
So, Ben says that randomness is not opposed to skill. In fact, he says that you can have more randomness and have more skill, that you don't have to tune it between the two. He uses the examples of tic-tac-toe and poker. Unfortunately, Ben is dead wrong on this point. Randomness is directly opposed to skill. The more random you make a game, the less skill it involves. That's the very definition of luck in games. For example, if you have a game that is purely random, like flipping a coin, there is no skill involved at all. On the other hand, if you have a game that has no randomness involved, victory is determined purely by skill. These things are in opposition. Now then, Ben uses the example of tic-tac-toe as a game that requires no skill. But he's wrong. Tic-tac-toe is all skill. If you make a wrong move against a skilled opponent, you will lose. The reason people find tic-tac-toe boring isn't because it doesn't require skill. It's because the level of skill required to be proficient at the game is so low that all games between equally skilled players will always end in a tie. And that's boring. But it is a skill-based game. A better example of a game that is all skill and not random would be chess. And in this case, because there is a near zero randomness in the game, the only thing that is random is who will go first, which does make a small difference. You can pretty much guarantee that the more skilled player will always win a game of chess. Now then, when it comes to a collectible card game like Hearthstone, you've got a mix of both elements, randomness or luck, and skill. And that's fine. That's what makes it fun and interesting and replayable. As a designer, you should be looking to balance these things against one another, such that players feel that the game rewards skill, but has still just enough randomness and chaos in it to keep things dynamic and interesting. It is a serious design mistake to think, as Ben apparently does, that you can just keep on piling more and more randomness and not take away from the skill required to be successful to play the game. So despite what Ben says, randomness in a game really is on a scale from all random luck and no skill, like a coin flip, to completely no luck and all skill, like chess. A good deck building game should fall somewhere in the middle, and in my view, lean more towards rewarding skill than relying upon luck. To that end, here's the principle that I think Ben and his team should be using. Whenever there is randomness in the game, design systems that allow players to influence the potential results via their skillful choices. Let me give you some examples. The most obvious one is deck construction. You've already got a big random factor in the game inherent in the very concept of a deck-based game. Players don't get to pick what cards they draw. There's a significant amount of randomness in this alone. Players, however, can influence this by deciding what cards they put into their deck. And your skill in managing that randomness via how you build your deck is a key factor in your success. So, letting players decide what goes into their deck is a very good design choice because it lets players influence what they draw and reduces luck. Compare that against, say, a tavern brawl like Randomonium, where all your cards are random and their casting costs change every turn. The addition of more randomness greatly reduces how much influence a skilled player can have on the outcome of a match. More randomness means less player control and hence makes the game more like a coin flip. Another good use of allowing randomness to be influenced by a player's skill is in the discover mechanic. Even though the cards you get are random, they always come with some parameters that influence the outcome. You'll always draw a 3-cost card, for example, and then you'll get to make a skillful choice about which one works best for you in the given situation. This is a good interplay of luck against skill.
We're still experimenting with kind of the ways that we have used randomness in the past. I think Discover is a great example of how we use randomness in a way that actually increases the amount of skill required to play Hearthstone, because there's a new challenge every time you play a Discover card. You have to figure out, what do I choose here, and then how do I use the card that I've chosen? Because this has never come up before in any of the games I've played, the players who are better at problem solving quickly are better at using those tools to their advantage. And so because there's that randomness, it actually can help distinguish better players from worse players.
On the other hand, when players have too little influence on the results, it drags the game away from skill and back towards being just a coin flip. Right now, a good example of a card like this is Yogg-Saron. The player really only has 2 fairly small ways to mitigate the randomness that is introduced by random spells being fired at random targets. The first is how many spells will go off, and the second is the choice of when and whether or not to play the card at all. Hence, I feel it's a bad card that in most cases reduces the game to a near totally random coin flip. Of course, you may rightly ask, why would anyone play such a card if it's so random that it essentially eliminates most of the skill in the game? The answer is, if you're behind and likely to lose, it is better to turn the game back into a 50-50 chance rather than losing outright. Yogg-Saron isn't played as a way to win a game, it's played as a way to stave off what would otherwise be a near certain loss. Now, having one card like this isn't game-breaking by itself. Players can work around it. But with each Yogg-Saron-like card that you bring in, you drag the game away from being about skill and more about luck and more about winning coin flips. Yogg-Saron is a bit of an extreme example, but there are many other examples. Any card which chooses targets randomly increases the amount of luck. The more random the targets, the more luck inherent in the card. Hence, Mad Bomber has more luck in it because it hits any character than does Arcane Missiles, which hits only enemies. Also, any card which does damage randomly increases the amount of luck. Hence, Crackle has more luck in it than does Lightning Storm. Again, luck isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you have to be really careful with it. If you add in too much that's out of the player's control to influence, you'll start to overshadow player skill. Ben also used the example of randomness in poker. He's right in that the cards you get in poker are all random, but note that if that's all there were to the game, that you just got dealt some cards and saw who won, there would be zero skill involved. None. It'd be just like flipping a coin. What makes poker a game of skill is the betting aspect. As a player, you are strongly influencing the results of a given hand based upon how you bet. On each hand of poker, you can bet, you can raise, you can call, you can bluff, you can even fold. Players have complete control over this element, and hence, that's where the skill comes in. So in poker, the cards you get dealt are purely luck. It's the bets you make that will, in turn, influence the outcome. And it's this part, the part where you can influence the outcome of the hand, is where the skill comes in. Again, here's the principle the design team should be using. Whenever there's randomness in the game, design systems that allow players to influence the potential results via their skillful choices. Okay, so enough of that. Ben also tries to say that the randomness in the game isn't really that big of a factor because we see the same people at the high ranks again and again.
Hearthstone esports is kind of weird. We talk about it at work sometimes about how, there's a lot of a chance, and it feels like you kind of have to win a bunch of coin flips in order to get to, the big show like BlizzCon or something like that. And so there's always new players coming in and cycling through. Like, what is your opinion on the randomness in Hearthstone?
Well, I think randomness is really important, actually. And what we are seeing is that there is a lot of consistency. Players who are winning at the highest levels are showing an amount of consistency that I think proves that there's a lot of skill in the game.
But Ben's point, that seeing the same high-level players consistently proves that randomness isn't undercutting skilled play, is based on an assumption. That assumption is that skilled play overshadows the luck in the gameplay when it comes to climbing the ladder. I counter that by saying that a key design element of Hearthstone's ranking system leads to a result that time played is critically important to your rank increase, so much so that it may even overshadow the skills of the players. What I'm talking about here is the decision to reward players with 2 stars when they get on a streak of wins. What this means is that players who play more are also more likely to hit lucky streaks and thereby inflate their ranks beyond what their level of play skill may actually be. I know what I just said there might be confusing, so allow me to quickly illustrate. Assume that we've changed Hearthstone to be entirely random. It's nothing but luck. The game now consists of nothing but 2 players meeting, flipping the coin, and one being declared the winner and one being declared the loser. If you win, you get a star and go up a little in rank. If you lose a star and go down a little. That's it. That's the whole game. Pretty boring and lame, I know, but follow me here for a second. Now then, if you had a really large population of players playing this coin-flipping version of Hearthstone, there would be some interesting mathematical results. First, you'd note that, over time, most players would statistically win about as many games as they lost. That means their net star count would tend to zero out. However, you'd also notice that some players would simply get really lucky or really unlucky, where they would either win a lot or they'd lose a lot, and they'd end up on the outlying ends. You'd end up with a statistical bell curve. Again, there's no skill here, just math. If you ran this coin-flipping game for many seasons, resetting players back to 0 stars after each one, you'd expect that you'd get a different group of players on the endpoints. The law of averages would keep things pretty even in the long run. However, if you tweaked the coin-flipping game such that the players who got on a streak of wins got a bonus star, you'd change this dynamic. Why? Because now the more you play, the more likely you are to hit a streak and get a bonus star. Since you only lose 1 star for a loss, but sometimes get 2 stars for a win, you'd gradually accumulate stars over time, even if the game were nothing but luck. This means that, at the end of a given season, you'd see a very high correlation between players that played a lot and their total star count. Now, I am not criticizing what the Hearthstone team has done by awarding extra stars. I think it's a fun mechanic, and I always like it when I go on a streak of wins and get some bonus stars. But this bonus star system is a counterpoint to Ben's assertion that the top-ranking players are also the most skilled players. Rather, it could just be that the players who are consistently ranking the highest are simply also the ones who are just playing the most. If the odds of winning any one game were 50-50, like they are in a coin flip game, but you're still giving away stars for hitting a winning streak, the math says that the key to getting into the high ranks and getting the most stars is simply to play more. Let's be clear though, playing Hearthstone does require skill. It is not merely a coin flipping game that I just imagined. However, it is important to point out that if it were, the ranking system of Hearthstone would still favor players who played a lot because of those bonus stars you get along the way. Hence, Ben's assumption that the top-ranked players are also the most skilled players is not automatically true. It is very possible, even probable, that many of the top-ranked players have actually just played more in a given time frame.
I think there's types of randomness that feel better than other types of randomness, and there's ways that we can kind of use randomness, I think maybe for good or for evil.
Okay, so finally, I want to say that I am not doing this to bash Hearthstone or Ben. I think Hearthstone is a great game and deserves its many accolades. I play it a lot, and I think it's really well done. But I also think that Ben's take on the role of randomness and luck may not be accurate, and it could be potentially damaging for the future of the game. And so I felt I should say something. But what do you think? Does Hearthstone rely too much on luck? Do you agree with me that Ben and his team should be careful about just piling on more and more randomness? Do you like my guideline of, whenever there is randomness in the game, design the systems that allow players to influence the potential results via their skillful choices? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below.